Hello everyone, Alex Hava for Discovery of Wine. Today we're talking bubbles. So champagne, sparkling wine, all that good stuff that everybody loves to have at a party and so on. So first of all, we're going to clarify champagne is sparkling wine, but sparkling wine isn't necessarily champagne, meaning that what champagne means, it's simply sparkling wine from the region of Champagne, which is about 150 kilometers east of Paris in France. So you can't ask for a champagne from California, for example. That would be a sparkling wine. So basically that's it. As simple as that for the introduction. Now let's get right into the subject. And we're going to have a slightly longer episode today because we're going to talk a lot about a few different terms and try and clarify things so that, you know, everything is clearer and easier to understand. So basically, yeah. So the first thing is there's different kinds of champagne. The most notable style is the traditional style. Nowadays, we're not allowed to say that, let's say a sparkling wine from California is made in the champagne method. That's not allowed anymore. There's a law against it. So it would be in the traditional method. So the method of making sparkling wine in Champagne is referred to as a traditional method, which is basically a second fermentation in the bottle, which creates the bubbles. And so traditional style sparkling wine is basically anywhere in the world's version of champagne, mostly. Now, the second thing that's important to know in the styles is the level of sweetness that your sparkling wine will have. So if we start with the less sweet, because what happens is that when they make the second fermentation, they basically make regular wine. And then what they do, they bottle it, they put some more yeasts in there, in the bottle. They put a sort of a bottle cap, like a beer cap, on the bottle. And what they do is they let it sit for a while, and it creates bubbles because it's a closed environment, right? So the wine creates bubbles, and they let it sit there for a year, 2 years, and so on. And after a while, they have the bottle upside down so that all the yeasts come to the screw top. And what they do, not the screw top, but sort of the beer cap top. And what they'll do is they'll freeze that, take it out, and then add a little bit more champagne because, you know, they just took out a bunch of let's say, liquid with the yeasts. And so they'll add a bit more champagne, and a lot of times they'll add some sugar. So the less sweet version with no added sugar whatsoever would be brut nature, which is also no dosé, so no dose of sugar added to it. Extra brut can also have, and brut as well, can also have no sugar at all, but there's, you know, a possibility of adding a little bit of sugar to those two labels, let's say. So brut is basically what most people drink. It's the most available product out there. It's the regular champagne, let's say. And so after that, so this is, let's say, a dry champagne would be called brut. Now extra dry has a little bit more sweetness to it. Sec or dry would have a little bit more. Demi-sec, and then doux. So doux would be quite sweet. Actually, it would be very sweet, almost like you know, I wouldn't want to say late harvest because that has nothing to do with it, but it would have a strong dose of sugar and would definitely be very sweet on the palate. Whereas brut is quite dry, and you know, those two categories before, extra brut and brut nature, you don't see very often. So that's about it for the level of sweetness, and that's a good way to know which type of champagne you like. If you know you like the dry champagne, go for the brut. If you like it a little bit more sweet, go for these, and that'll give you a good idea, not a good idea, but a good guideline as to which champagne to buy if, you know, you're trying a new brand, for example. Second of all, I'm going to give you a few of the sparkling wines that exist throughout the world. There's the German sparkling wine that is, after France, is the second country that produces the most sparkling wine. However, the Germans are also the first consumers worldwide of sparkling wine, and so there's very little of their production that gets outside the country, and so we don't see much of it over here. So that's why, well, I just talked about it, but I'm not going to go further into it. Cava is basically Spain's version of sparkling wine. 95% of the sparkling wine in Spain is Cava, which comes from the region around Barcelona. It's very good, it's usually very cheap, and so that's a great alternative to champagne when you want to find something that is tasty but doesn't cost you too much money. Champagne, obviously from the region of Champagne. Now mousseux means the same thing as sparkling wine. Crémant and Blanquette. So in France, the first sparkling wine that was ever made was in the Languedoc region, so in the south of France, on the Mediterranean, and it was called Blanquette de Limoux, or Blanquette Ancestrale, depending on the terminology you want to use. And so that was the first sparkling wine they made in France. Now, you can probably find some of that stuff, and you know, it's regular sparkling wine. It can be good, it can be not so good, but it's only that region that uses that appellation of Blanquette, which basically Blanquette also means sparkling wine. The term used in most regions in France to designate a sparkling wine would be Crémant. So you would have Crémant and then the name of the region. So let's say Crémant d'Alsace or Crémant from the Loire Valley. And so there's a trend now that's been going for a couple of years that every region that produces sparkling wine is starting to call it Crémant, so that there's more uniformity and it's easier for the consumer to understand what product he's buying. One other thing that I wanted to mention, I know a lot of people like to buy regular wine from smaller growers. You'll get a more typical version of the wine, or it might have some aromas that are more pronounced, because obviously if you have a huge field, or if you're buying berries from different producers, blending everything together like those big négociants do, your wine will tend to have a more uniform taste. If you want something a little bit more special, not necessarily better, but a little more different, special, you would try and go for the small producer. Now, if you're looking in the region of Champagne for gros champagne, like that's the term used to say that small producer that makes his own wine, the term in French is récoltant manipulant, which I wrote here, and the abbreviation for that is RM. So when you see RM on a champagne bottle, it means that basically the farmer has his own berries, picks them up himself, makes the wine himself, sells it himself. So that will be the Champagne's version of the small grower. Another term that's also useful to know when you're looking for specific champagne is that well, I'll go back a step. Sorry about that, and explain to you the 3 different varietals used in champagne. So basically, there is a rule in Champagne, and it doesn't apply to any other region in the world. But I know in California they're trying to use the same varietals most of the time, because most of the sparkling wine producers, in California are also champagne producers. So the big champagne producers in France bought some land in California and they're making their own sparkling wine in California. And so they can't call it champagne, but they have the know-how, and you can find some very good products from California that are, you know, half the price of the champagne, but it's actually the same producer. So, you know, you're not going to find exactly the same thing because the terroir is different. However, you're going to find some good know-how and, you know, hundreds of years of existence for, you know, the founders of those estates. Anyways, so the 3 varietals used are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. So you'll notice that Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier are actually red berries. So basically what happens is that those 2 types of grapes are actually red-skinned, but the interior is white. So the pulp, basically the fruit itself, is white. So they're able to make champagne with those varietals without the champagne having the red color. And how that works is that basically, let's say they use Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier to make a batch of champagne, they will let it ferment, but they won't let the skins ferment with the rest of the juice for too long, because it's actually the skin that gives most of the color to the wine. Obviously you have berries that the pulp inside is dark as well. In those cases, it would be very hard, well, practically impossible to make a wine that's completely white like most champagnes are. So that's the first thing. So basically Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. Pinot Meunier is mostly used to make champagne. You rarely see it as a regular still wine. But it will provide some nice aromas and fruitiness to the champagne. Pinot Noir will give it structure. We all know that Pinot Noir can last for years when it's a good Pinot Noir from Burgundy, for example. And you know, there's other examples throughout the world that make good Pinot Noir. And then there's Chardonnay, which so Pinot Noir will give it structure, and Chardonnay will give it more finesse, let's say. So those three varietals, only three varietals allowed in Champagne. And the link to that, my next point that I was going to say earlier, was that sometimes you'll see on the bottle it'll say Blanc de Blanc, which means white from white. And basically it's white champagne made from white grapes. The only white grape allowed in Champagne is Chardonnay. So if you see Blanc de Blanc, it means that it's 100% Chardonnay in the bottle. If you see Blanc de Noir, meaning white from black, it means that the only two varietals allowed in that, or used to make that champagne, were Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. And if you don't see anything, it's usually because it's a blend of the three. So basically that's it. The other thing that you might be interested in is there's sort of, there's more than three, but there's three main categories of champagne. There's the regular champagne, there's the Premier Cru or first growth, and Grand Cru. Grand Cru being the best. And how it works around there, it's different than anywhere else in the world, is that basically, you know, the governing body of Champagne years and years ago, what they did is that they looked at the whole region of Champagne, at every single parcel of land, and said, okay, we're going to grade them. And all of them were graded from 80% to 100%, okay? And so there's nothing under 80%. So anywhere between 80 and 89% for the land, so any grape that was grown on a land that's classified between 80 and 89% is called basically regular champagne, or just champagne. Anything from 90 to 99% would be first growth, or Premier Cru, and any terroir that is graded 100% will make grapes that can be used to make a champagne that would be labeled Grand Cru. And basically that was the reason for those percentages, was for a reference point for the price of sale back in the day. It doesn't completely apply anymore, but basically there was a reference point, let's say $100 a liter if it's 100%, and then if your terroir makes a wine and the terroir is classified 85%, you would, when you sell that wine, you would get 85% of that reference $100 that I was just telling about. And basically that pretty much covers it all, I think. I don't think I forgot anything, but those are the basic guidelines, and hopefully you enjoyed this little bit of education. Tomorrow's our 50th episode, and so I have a little something planned for you guys. Hopefully you like it. I think it's going to be a little bit different and fun. So I'll leave you with that, and maybe you guys can tell me what type of champagne or sparkling wine you guys are drinking. What do you like? And so it's a good, you know, reference for anybody that's interested in trying something new. So that's it for now, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.